Hello, my name is Karen Gandoli, and I am the CEO of LeoStream. Today, I want to cover some of the considerations that you'll need to think about if you have distributed workers, whether that's meaning that they are scattered across the globe, across the country, or maybe you just have resources in different regions as well, but you have distributed teams and they're accessing GPU enabled workstations to do graphics intense or compute intense workflows. That is actually a very tricky environment to manage and optimize. And it also is an environment that LeoStream really excels at helping you with. So why is it hard? First of all, you have these GPU-enabled instances that are not confined to one location. Back in the old days, if you had a number of racked workstations in your data center and you needed to reboot them all, you could walk into the data center and do that. Once you're talking about using on-prem with cloud, different regions, different cloud providers, you have these resources scattered everywhere, and now you have to figure out, how do I centrally manage all of that? You also have teams that need to access these GPUs, and you want them to be able to move across sites, use different platforms, and do that in a way that optimizes their performance and optimizes the resource usage. And then also, the last thing that makes it hard is figuring out how you're going to connect users to those machines, because ultimately the performance they get from their environment depends not just on the GPU itself. You have to think about the network, you have to think about display protocols, and again, these environments get pretty complex. So where exactly should you be looking when you want to make sure that you've optimized your environment? Well, first, as I mentioned, network latency. High latency between users and GPUs can degrade their performance for their graphics. What that means is you probably want to connect users to machines that are closest to where that user is physically located. And then the way you want to do that connection is using the appropriate display protocol based on the user's task and workload. So that's about the connection, but now there's also just managing the environment itself. Some things you need to be careful about is to making sure that you're not oversubscribed to GPU resources in the cloud. You don't want things sitting idle when people aren't using them, and you don't want to have more capacity than you need, realizing that those needs change over time. So you want ways to automate that capacity and that power state. You do not want to be using manual provisioning and manual power management, because that is just going to be a nightmare for IT, and it's just not maintainable. It's also not scalable. When you start working with GPU environments, you often start small. You'll do a proof of concept, and then you'll start rolling that out to production. You'll be adding in new editors, developers, contractors, whatever they happen to be. But your environment's going to grow over time, and you need a platform that's going to help you manage that growth in a way that, again, optimizes resource usage and minimizes costs. And then finally, just a little bit more on display protocols. There are a number of different ways that you can connect a user to a remote GPU-enabled instance, whether that's in the cloud, on-prem, what have you. And that protocol choice matters because the different display protocols, whether that's HP Anywhere with PC over IP, MEC9 TGX, Amazon DCV, just to name a few, they are all very good, and some of them are optimized on different things. So you really need to test them all out and see which ones work best for your different workloads, and realize that what will really make your environment powerful is if you have an easy way to mix and match those protocols and use the appropriate one based on the user and what they need. And again, that is something that LeoStream has excelled at forever, since our inception. So to kind of show this a little bit in action, this is the LeoStream web interface for my connection broker environment, my LeoStream platform environment. I'm just going to log in as an admin and show you some of the things that really allow you to easily manage a global distributed GPU-enabled workforce. So some things that are important are your centers. A center in LeoStream is any third-party system that hosts your resources. So if I have users who are in different parts of the United States and maybe some over in the EU, you'll see what I did is I created a center for AWS Ohio. I also have one for AWS in Ireland. And then for my users on the East Coast, I have an Azure Center, which happens to be in US East. There are a number of different ways that you can connect to hosting platforms. You'll see the list there. So you can always make sure that you have resources hosted closest to where your users are going to be located. Again, about minimizing that latency. And then it's a matter of how do you make sure that you connect users to the appropriate resource based on where it's in. Well, if I look in my configurations here, just to show you what I've done, and there are many different ways to do this, but here's an example. I've created pools. In one case, I have a pool which is all of my machines in my AWS Ohio region. And then I've created subpools, in my case, based on the different ways I can connect users. So maybe that's PC over IP, RDP, TGX, whatever you want to use. Then I also have pools that are for my desktops, in this case, in East Coast. There's my US East Azure Center. So I've created pools based on regions, and then I can create subpools based on use cases. And then you can connect users to the right use case for the region they're in. The way you do that is through what concept we call locations. A location in LeoStream is essentially a set of client devices. So whenever the user sits down at a laptop, a web browser, a thin client, the connection broker gathers a lot of information about that device, and you can use that to define a location. So here you see I have a location for my users coming in from Ohio. In this case, what it is again, this is just an example, and it all depends on how you want to set up your network. But for my users coming in from Ohio, they're logging in through a LeoStream gateway that also is in Ohio. And the broker knows that. So I can say anyone who logs in through that gateway, they're in Ohio, please connect them to an Ohio machine. So I create as many locations as I need. And then in assignments, I can change what the user has access to based on those locations. So in my case, any user who comes in from Ohio, they get a machine in Ohio. Any user who's coming in from the West Coast will get a machine that's on the West Coast. So I am sitting in Ohio, or I should say my T1 user is. So they're coming in through the Ohio gateway, and they'll be offered a machine. This happens to connect using PC over IP. Again, there are any number of ways to launch this. I'm just going to set this aside while it does its thing. But you could use TGX. I can use DCV. You can mix and match them however you want that to work. But what you can see here, if I look at the log page gives you a nice running tally of everything that's going on in your system. And I can see when the user logs in. And I can see that they're getting that Ohio policy because they came in from the Ohio location. So that's just one example of how you can make it easy to manage and connect users to distributed GPU instances. If you want to learn more or you have questions, you can always contact us at info@leostream.com. Thank you.